employment protections to LGBTQ individuals in workplaces across America. That decision, however, does not apply to service members. That means our service members, who often come from communities that have for generations bravely sacrificed for the United States, currently enjoy fewer statutory protections than their civilian counterparts. Think about what that says about our country. The law treats the people willing to risk their lives to defend our freedoms as second-class citizens. It's unconscionable and it's un-American. In this moment of reckoning on civil rights, we must ensure those rights extend to all of our military service members. To push for the desegregation of our troops, for gender integration into combat, and for the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, were all met with similar arguments about how increased opportunity for the group in question would hamper readiness, unit cohesion, or otherwise weaken the military. Those arguments have been proven wrong every single time. It is, in fact, the lack of protections for these groups that hamper readiness. Without protections, an able platoon sergeant can be stigmatized and driven from the military because he's transgender. His years of experience and the immense investments the military has made in him can be erased with the stroke of a pen. Our military has only grown stronger as it better represents our country. But right now, in the year 2020, people who are willing to make extraordinary sacrifices for our freedoms are being told no, simply because of who they are. We must do better, and we can. We can make sure the National Defense Authorization Act includes discrimination protections for all service members. My amendment with Senator Collins would codify in the law that service members of all races, religions, and sexes are protected from discrimination. Mr. President, I would affirm that Americans of every race, religion, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, and national origin have the right to join and serve and sacrifice in our military. I was proud to have Senator John McCain join me in leading similar legislation to protect transgender troops 3 years ago. The late senator said, quote, "Any member of the military who meets the medical and readiness standards should be allowed to serve, including those who are transgender." I hope this will be the year that we deliver the results he wanted for our troops. Placing language safeguarding this right into the NDAA can help us begin to overcome an unfortunate legacy of creating artificial, blatantly unfair barriers to service by underrepresented groups. It's a legacy that continues to this day with the Trump administration's ban on transgender service members. That discriminatory ban is not only an insult to members of the transgender community who have served our country, it's an insult to every LGBTQ person who has given their life to protect it. Arguments against open transgender service have no basis in experience or in science. Transgender individuals served openly in the military for more than 2.5 years without any readiness or cohesion issues. I know because I asked all 4 service chiefs and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and they all confirmed it. Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mark Milley, who was then Chief of Staff of the Army, told me that he had received, quote, precisely 0 reports of issue of cohesion, discipline, or morale caused by transgender individuals in the service. The American Medical Association, the American Psychiatric Association, and other experts agree there is no medically valid reason to exclude transgender individuals from military service. Anyone who can meet the military standards should be allowed to serve and serve in an environment free from discrimination. It is that simple. Our armed services should reflect the best of what this country has to offer in their values and in their ranks. We cannot allow for laws that unnecessarily limit their ability to recruit and retain the best person for the job. I ask my colleagues to support our troops with more than lip service. I ask my colleagues to extend to them protections from discrimination based on race, religion, or sex. These are people who are willing to fight for our country. These are people who are willing to die for our country. This body and our country must be willing to fight for them. My amendment will do exactly that. I ask all of you to support its inclusion in this year's NDAA. Mr. President.
Senator from New York.
Now I rise again to address another issue. I rise because, according to the Pentagon's most recent biannual survey, almost 21,000 service members were sexually assaulted in the year 2018. That was a 38% increase from the year before. I rise because the current climate of retaliation in our armed services and the lack of justice provided by the chain of command meant nearly 3/4 of those assaults went unreported, and less than 10% of cases considered for command action went to trial. Less than 10%. I rise because I stood in this very chamber in 2013 and shared essentially the same statistics. Mr. President, year after year, the leaders of our armed services come to Congress and commit to making things better. They commit to us in hearing after hearing, we'll get this right. Yet, year after year, thousands of service members are raped and sexually assaulted, and their assailants are not held accountable. In many of those cases, the assailant is someone in the survivor's chain of command, the same chain of command who will decide the case, picking judge, jury, prosecutor, defense counsel, all decided by a commander in that chain of command. There is no other judicial system in America that would ever allow this to happen. This system is not delivering justice. The chain of command is not delivering justice. These decisions, these fundamental civil rights decisions, need to be made somewhere else. They need to be made by trained, impartial, military professionals, prosecutors, lawyers, people who are trained to make this very hard decision. We are asking survivors to come forward in an environment where they know that less than that there is less than a 10% chance that the chain of command will try their assailant for a crime, and worse, that there is only a 2 in 3 chance that they themselves will face retaliation. Despite repeated efforts to stamp out the scourge of retaliation against military sexual assault survivors, the most recent Pentagon survey found that 64% of these survivors have experienced some form of retaliation for reporting the crime. This figure is statistically unchanged from 2016. It's unacceptable. So I ask you, Mr. President, who is this system designed for? I think so often about a Marine veteran who told me, quote, "When I reported the assault, my command responded with retaliation, ostracism, intimidation, and isolation. The humiliation of the retaliation was worse than the assault because it was sanctioned by those same leaders I once would have risked my life for. The climate of retaliation comes from the top. It comes from the chain of command. They should not be deciding these cases. They do not have the background or the impartiality necessary to deliver justice. This system is broken, and it is failing our service members. This Congress has passed and spent hundreds of millions of dollars on incremental reforms since 2013. During that time, an estimated 137,000 service members have been assaulted. Let me say that again. During that time, 137,000 service members have been sexually assaulted. What are we doing here? Can we not hold the U.S. military accountable? Can we not do our jobs? Can we not stand up for the men and women who risk their lives for us every day? Incremental changes that leaves the power in the hands of the chain of command is not enough. We have the proof and the evidence. We've got this, ma'am. We've got this. They say it every year. They don't have it, and they haven't had it. For the last 7 years, we have been focused on this very issue. It does not do enough to protect our service members from sexual assault in the ranks or to punish perpetrators who commit these violent crimes. Just for a minute, Mr. President, imagine this is your daughter or your son. Imagine just for a minute that your children decide to go into the military. Do you think they will be protected? My bill, the Military Justice Improvement Act, is being offered as an amendment to the NDAA. This amendment will professionalize. It will professionalize how the military prosecutes serious crimes like sexual assault, and it will remove the systemic fear that survivors have to report these crimes. Survivors don't report these crimes because they fear the retaliation against them. This bipartisan and common sense reform leaves the majority of uniquely military crimes, as well as crimes punishable by less than 1 year of confinement within the chain of command. It would only move one decision, literally one decision, that only 3% of commanders actually have the right to make. And that decision will be made by a trained military prosecutor. These prosecutors are military JAGs. They're military JAGs that are required to be licensed attorneys in good standing with their state bar associations and are subject to professional rules of ethics. Those are common sense standards, but they are not the standards that commanders have. Commanders aren't typically lawyers. They're not typically criminal lawyers. They're not trained in how to make this fundamental decision about whether a crime has been committed. So why wouldn't you let military police investigate the crime just as they do today? They take that investigation, and instead of putting it on the commander's general counsel's desk, they'll put it on a military prosecutor's desk. The military prosecutor gets to make a decision, yes or no, I can prosecute or I can't. Then that file goes right back to the commander. So when the commander wants to do non-judicial punishment, he gets to do it. Every time a prosecutor says there's no case here, he gets to have the same authority he has today. And under today's standards, only 10% of these cases go to trial. That would mean the commanders only don't get to make that one decision that 3% of them get to make 10% of the time. Because 90% of the time it comes right back to the commander to do whatever non-judicial punishment he or she thinks is appropriate. So this is a very small but important change, because when you make this change, the survivor sees that the decision isn't being made within her chain of command. She sees, or he sees, that the decision is being made by somebody trained to make the decision, someone who's actually a prosecutor. He or she will then believe it is worth reporting the crime. So many of these crimes don't even get reported. And sadly, the percentage of that are being reported, it's going up, the percentage of those who report confidentially. It doesn't show that there's any faith in the system if people will only report if they don't name their perpetrator. This reform is nothing new. This reform has been done all across the world by our allies. Our allies in the United Kingdom, Canada, Israel, Germany, Norway, Australia have all removed reporting and prosecution of violent sex crimes out of the chain of command. Leaders in those militaries have reported that these changes have not diminished their ability in any way. It has not diminished their commanders' ability to maintain good order and discipline, to train their troops, and to do what they are there for. Congress owes our service members a debt of gratitude that can never be fully repaid. These brave men and women who have experienced the unimaginable are counting on us this year to finally take real action. Until we do, we continue to fail in our responsibility to protect them. Madam President, this is something we have worked on together over 7 years. This is something that, on a bipartisan basis, this chamber has worked on for 7 years. We've been denied a vote on this over the last 5 years. Denied a vote on this for the last 5 years. The military has fought tooth and nail to not put in these fundamental reforms. They ask us over and over, Madam President, trust us, we got this. Trust us, we got this. They don't have it. They haven't had it, and they don't focus on it. If you just look at the report from this year alone, we are up to over 20,000 sexual assaults in the last year. The percentage of cases that are being reported confidentially is going up. The percentage of cases that are being reported openly are going down. The percentage of cases that are going to trial is going down. The percentage of cases ending in conviction is going down. So under no measurable today has the military succeeded in this mission. Under none. Under absolutely none. They say they got this. They don't have it. Never have. And if we don't do our job this year, they never will. This is not something new. This is something other countries who are our allies have done. It professionalizes the military. It gives hope to survivors. It creates permission for them to report these crimes. If more crimes are reported, more prosecutions will be completed. More cases will end in conviction. Send a message. Convict perpetrators. Protect survivors. Honor the sacrifice and legacy of every man and woman who serves in the military today, who will give their life for this country. That is our responsibility, Madam President. I urge everyone in this chamber, stand with our troops, stand with the men and women who sacrifice everything, and do the right thing. It's our job. We are supposed to provide oversight and accountability over the U.S. military. It is the Senate's job. And every year we don't address this fundamental scourge is another year we fail. I'm tired of this chamber failing our service members. I'm tired of our commanders and our military failing our service members. We owe everything to them. I yield the floor. Madam President, I suggest the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the